Well, good Monday evening. I'm meteorologist Evan Stewart, and you're joining us here on Hurricane Hub Live. It is October 27th, and we're looking at everything Melissa, because that is the big story as we go here on this Monday evening, a massive Category 5 hurricane that is down in the Atlantic. So this evening on Hurricane Hub Live, it's all about Melissa, Category 5 hurricane, Jamaica expected to get a direct hit and then a secondary landfall in Cuba, and then it's going to head up towards the Bahamas and eventually towards the island of Bermuda. So again, a lot to talk about with Melissa, so let's get right to it. Melissa is now the 5th hurricane this season. We had Aaron, which was a Category 5 hurricane. Then we had Humberto, which was a 5, Imelda, which was a 2, and we had Melissa, which was a 5, and we had Gabrielle, which was a 4. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 major hurricanes so far this year. So even though we've only had 5 hurricanes, 4 of them that become major hurricanes. And Melissa, that's the latest and the strongest so far this season, with winds of 175 miles per hour. And we're getting close here to the end of hurricane season. It runs through the end of November, but typically peaks on September 10th. And we're here at October 27th, so we really start to see that downward trend, but we can still see activity in the month of November and even in December. So even though we're on that downward trend, one area that hasn't seen much of anything this year has been the Caribbean, and now we have Hurricane Melissa that is taking aim on the island of Jamaica, also Cuba, Haiti, and eventually the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos, and even parts of the Cayman Islands. So these are what are known as the Greater Antilles. You hear us talk about the Lesser Antilles. Well, the Greater Antilles are these larger islands like Jamaica, Cuba, and Hispaniola. Here's the latest satellite loop, and you might notice that it's sort of been wobbling around, and here on the last few frames really hasn't moved. And as of the 8 o'clock advisory, it's only moving at 2 miles per hour. You walk faster than that. So there has been a little bit of a stall with the storm system, but it still continues to be a major hurricane. Again, Category 5, catastrophic hurricane, and we can still see that symmetry here on the enhanced satellite. This measures the cold cloud tops, the satellite does, and the colder the cloud tops, we know they're higher up. So again, when we start to see some of those pink colors in there, those are really cold cloud tops. And the storm, again, hasn't moved much. Now, Hurricane Hunter aircraft have been out there investigating it as we've gone through the day today. Here's the latest one that is just starting its mission here, just flying its first pass here through the eye wall. So far, it's only found winds of 71 miles per hour. We know that there are stronger winds inside of it, and they're going to do the crisscross pattern. And now earlier today, the NOAA Hurricane Hunter aircraft, they had to turn back because the turbulence was so bad, and we had the Air Force Hurricane Hunter that was out there earlier, and they're the ones who found winds of 175 miles per hour, and they actually reported one of the clearest eyes in the Atlantic Basin, the Caribbean is part of that they have ever seen. And there are actually birds that are there in the middle of the eye of the hurricane, which is not uncommon. The birds sort of just float on some of the winds that are out there, and we're looking at the storm to eventually make that turn off towards the north. Now, I mentioned that the Hurricane Hunter aircraft are in there right now, and now, of course, it's dark. But I want you to take a look at this cool video. This is actual footage taken from Hurricane Hunters inside the eye of Melissa. All right, apparently we're having problems with that video, but one of the crew members on the aircraft said that it is, quote, as clear of an eye as you'll ever see in the Atlantic Basin, as I mentioned. Now, let's talk about the eye wall and the process of capturing some of the incredible video like this. Meteorologist Derek Van Dam has that.
These airborne laboratories capture critical weather information from all corners of a storm. This crisscross pattern that you see here allows for weather conditions to be sampled at different altitudes and quadrants of a hurricane. At this stage, the storm could be rapidly strengthening. Significant drops in pressure and increases in wind speed are adding stresses to the aircraft. Now, the crew can experience extreme turbulence with drops in altitude of hundreds of feet in a matter of seconds. The plane descends to 10,000 feet so they can punch through the eye wall. The strongest part of the storm where winds can exceed 150 miles per hour. And just like that, conditions go eerily quiet. The clouds clear above them as the air descends into the center of the storm, creating a stadium effect, where the towering clouds of the eye wall surrounding the storm's clear center and create the look of a stadium. How? You could see all the way to the blue sky. At this point, the navigator marks the center of the storm, an important waypoint for predicting the future path of a hurricane, while a device known as a dropsonde is released from the belly of the plane. This little instrument transmits crucial weather data back to the plane as it falls all the way down to the ocean's surface. That data is analyzed by meteorologists and computers back at the National Hurricane Center, helping to create the updated forecast that you see at home so you can make informed decisions ahead of the storm.
And that was meteorologist Eric Van Dam. Now, this is the video we were trying to show you earlier. Again, that actual footage taken from Hurricane Hunter aircraft inside the eye of Melissa earlier today. And as we mentioned, one of the crew members on the aircraft said that this is about as clear of an eye as you will ever see in the Atlantic Basin. So, you know, right there, center of the storm, it's nice and calm. Again, you can see looking up that stadium effect, you can see the blue skies and then some stratus clouds down towards the bottom. So this is the break that the Hurricane Hunter aircraft get, is when they fly through that eye wall that they see those strongest winds, and that's where they have the bumpiest ride. So back to the maps we go. Again, Hurricane Hunter aircraft are in there again, investigating the storm. Again, they do that sort of crisscross pattern, and they also sample some of the atmosphere outside around the storm. Now, I want to put on the 5 o'clock cone that came in from the Hurricane Center, and you'll notice that right now, that center of the storm is right here, that southern center of the cone, and notice how it was moving off towards the northwest, and now it sort of stopped and almost made a little bit of a loop. Let's follow that center again, sort of came over here, and now it sort of almost made a little bit of a loop, and eventually it's going to be pulled off towards the north. Now, whether it's made that stall now, it's going to move south and then move off towards the north remains to be seen, but it's really western parts of the island of Jamaica that are going to be hit the hardest with the center of the storm. Now, the good news is those winds are only about 50 miles, the hurricane force winds, only about 50 miles across. So a lot of eastern Jamaica is not going to get hurricane force winds. We'll still see tropical storm force winds and maybe some gusts approaching hurricane strength. And those 175-mile-per-hour winds are only really right around the eye wall, and typically only in one little section of the eye wall, typically towards the northeast or that eastern corner here of the eye wall. So wherever it makes landfall, that's going to be the one area that sees those strongest winds. But still, with the storm coming ashore, we're going to see those winds coming in out of the south. And even over here through eastern Jamaica, we're still going to see copious amounts of rain. We're going to see that storm surge coming in, and even Montego Bay on the north shore is going to feel some of the impact. So here's that the 8 o'clock advisory from the Hurricane Center, 175-mile-per-hour winds, and there's that northwestward movement only at 2 miles per hour. So ever so slowly here, off towards the north. Again, coming ashore late tonight, early tomorrow morning. By 2 o'clock into the afternoon, already over land and weakening, because the mountains here in Jamaica are quite tall, over 7,000 feet. We'll take a look at that in a moment, and that certainly is going to exacerbate the flooding issues and the landslide issues. So that's our first landfall here in Jamaica, and then we're going to have a secondary landfall here on the southern tip of Cuba. Still a Category 3 hurricane with winds of 125 miles per hour. And then moving through the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos. So we could have a third landfall moving through the Bahamas, and then it's going to rapidly accelerate off towards the north and east. Part of the reason we have a pretty big trough here in the eastern half of the country, that's going to give us the rain later tonight and tomorrow here in eastern Virginia and North Carolina, become a little bit of a coastal low, but that's going to help jet the storm off towards the north and east. So let's talk about that rainfall here still to come across Jamaica. This is the graph model from IBM, and you can see it's still forecasting over a foot of rain through much of the island, and we're getting closer here to 2 feet of rain in some spots as the updated models are just coming in now. But again, very, very heavy rain. That's going to cause issues with flooding. It's also going to cause issues with landslides because, as I mentioned, there are some big mountains here across the island of Jamaica. So let's talk about the winds and sort of time it out for you. As that center of the storm approaches here towards Black River, notice those wind gusts, 116 miles per hour. And even here in Kingston and Morant Bay, even though we're not going to see those strongest of the winds, we'll still have that rain overspreading the area. And those winds coming in out of the south, all of these little coves in here, that's just going to push the water up in there, and we'll have issues with storm surge flooding, even though the storm is going to make landfall back here on the western part of the island. And then as we go into Tuesday around midday, as the storm is about to exit off towards the north, still the North Shore, Albertown, over towards Montego Bay, still going to have wind gusts well over 100 miles per hour. Ocho Rios, one of the popular vacation destinations as well, 57 mile per hour, and still, gusts approaching 60 miles per hour as the storm moves off towards the north. Then we turn our attention here towards Cuba and Manzanillo, wind gusts over 80 miles per hour. And down here, we don't have any real cities to plot, but here on the east side, again, we could have winds over 100 miles per hour and gusts. And you can see here towards Santiago de Cuba, wind gusts over 70 miles per hour, Guantanamo 54. And then as the storm moves off towards the north, again, the North Shore could have those winds gusting over hurricane strength. And then it moves up into the Bahamas, Duncantown. This is as we move into Wednesday, 112 mile per hour wind gusts, 78 over towards Albertown as we go through parts of the Bahamas, and still, even by Wednesday afternoon, wind gusts over 100 miles per hour across the Bahamas before everything finally moves off towards the north. And these Wednesday evening, gusts over 120 miles per hour still possible. So there are going to be numerous islands that are impacted by this storm, significantly impacted. Catastrophic damage is likely across parts of Jamaica. And then the storm, as we mentioned, is going to make that secondary landfall in Cuba, and then it'll go through the Bahamas and then move off towards the north and east. So here's one final view of the storm here south of Jamaica, moving slowly to the northwest at around 2 miles per hour. And I want to mention those islands here. You got the Blue Mountains here on the eastern side of Jamaica. The peak of Blue Mountain, 7,402 feet. So a mile is 5,280 feet. So more than a mile up. And you imagine, 15 inches of rain falling down on these mountains and working its way down. That is going to cause some significant issues with some landslides likely here through Jamaica. And that's on the east side of the mountain, or of the island. There's still some mountains on the western side, but the tallest mountains are here in eastern Jamaica, and you have tall islands in Cuba as well. So the storm almost stationary right now, moving at 2 miles per hour, expected late tonight and during the overnight to make landfall here in western Jamaica. Coming up, we'll talk more about Melissa's landslide threat and evacuations through other parts of Jamaica. Staying on the possible impacts to come with Hurricane Melissa, fishermen in St. Mary, Jamaica were seen removing their boats from the shoreline, the seashore, ahead of the arrival of Hurricane Melissa. Now, there are one of many coastal areas across the island that are expected to be hit by severe floods and storm surge due to Melissa. Now, on Sunday, officials ordered mandatory evacuations for several areas across the island. National Hurricane Center Deputy Director Jamie Rome explains the threat of landslides during this storm.
We've seen the rainfall projections of upwards of 3 feet of rain, 3 feet, over 30 inches of rain. You have to talk about it in feet. It's so much. It hits that mountainside and it's got to come down instantaneously, and it creates an instant flash flood. But when it comes down, it comes down with mud and debris and rocks, and that's what causes these landslides. And then all that water tries to go into the ocean. It's going to try to go into the ocean, and the storm surge is going to stop it. Like the storm surge pushing up against this southern coastline is going to stop all that water from trying to flow into the ocean. And that collision is going to create this flooding potential that we've been trying desperately to talk about.
Yeah, so we have the winds to worry about and the flooding from the rain and the storm surge. Residents in the highly impacted areas are required to evacuate immediately to designated shelters or safe locations. Officials say this is not a request, it's a directive.
Led by our Prime Minister, we have fully activated all of our emergency operations. We are on high alert. The Municipal Corporation, the Ministry of Local Government, my ministry, the Ministry of Labour, and across government with our partners, all of us together are working, collaborating to inform the people firstly. Information and the passage of that information in an accurate way is critical. So where are the shelters? What do you do? What should you look out for? And most importantly, to get them to understand the intensity and the danger that comes with this particular storm. It is very slow, it is very, very, very intense, and that means the outcome may potentially be extreme devastation and danger. And I want to tell everyone who is listening, who is watching, the evacuation order is not a suggestion. It is a directive, and a directive to save your life.
And of course, we'll have updates throughout the day tomorrow on 13 News Now Plus and on 13 News Now. Of course, we'll talk a lot about it tomorrow morning on the weather desk with Craig Moeller at 9 a.m. And of course, I'll be here tomorrow night, and we'll be here throughout the week at 8 p.m. for Hurricane Hub Live. Again, we do this every day at 8 p.m. throughout hurricane season. And of course, the big story the next couple of days will be Hurricane Melissa. For now, I'm 13 News Now meteorologist Evan Stewart. Thanks for joining us on Hurricane Hub Live.